Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my face is half done because today we are only focusing on foundation. As you can see from the title, this is a Foundation 101 or a Foundation for Beginners video. I kind of did this before, just talking about some of my favorites, but today I really wanted to focus solely on foundation. How to apply, what tools are best, how to match your shade, how to find your undertone, all of those fun little things that will really help you to make sure that your foundation matches you beautifully. So if that's something you're into, make sure to keep on watching. And please don't forget to subscribe because I do upload twice a week, and that is the best way to stay up to date on all the fun stuff I'm posting. Also, make sure to leave me a comment down below with what your all-time favorite foundation is, because I would love to hear about it. I find that I've been in a little bit of a rut lately using the same products over and over, so I'd love to go out and give some of your recommendations a try. So, without further ado, let's get right into the video. Okay, so the skin is already prepped and you can use whatever primer you want. I'm gonna link up here a video I did on my favorite primers and what best primers work for different things. But today I took the IT Cosmetics Pore Refining Mattifying Primer and a little bit of my Tatcha Silk Canvas just in my pore problem areas, and then we're gonna jump right into foundation. So I have said here before several times that I do like to mix foundations. The reason I do that is sometimes you'll get a different finish. So the first foundation I typically like to take in is a liquid foundation. This is the Dior Forever, which has been a favorite of mine for a long time. My favorite way to apply this is with a beauty blender. So I would not recommend using a beauty blender for oil-based foundations, but those that are water-based, it does work really well. I like to take one pump at a time and just build this up starting in the center of the face and then working your way outwards. This area is where we tend to need more coverage. So that's where we want to focus the most of the product. And then as we kind of see it covering what we want to cover, we kind of feather it towards the outside. Now the reason I like to take a little bit at a time rather than putting everything like all over the face like this and then dotting is that I've noticed that I use more product that way. Whereas if I just kind of put it on the sponge and dot it in, it gives me a little more control about where that product is going. And you see how that was the entire forehead? And I'll be able to actually take that pretty much on the rest of the face. Now lately you guys have also seen me using the Dior Air Flash. These are not the same, they are actually quite different. This one's a little bit more lightweight. Does give you a little bit more of like that airbrushed finish. You just kind of take a little bit, and then same way, just kind of bounce it into the skin. The reason, again, I like to use a sponge is I find that it distributes the product a little bit better. It doesn't get streaky. And it does give you a little bit more of like an airbrushed smooth finish. So now the reason I like this foundation is it does have a cool undertone, which for me makes it actually look like my foundation color. Sometimes you'll see foundations look a little yellow and that just means that they're too warm for you. And if they look too like red, then they're too cool for you. Where most people fall in neutral, I don't. I am cool toned. So for me, warm tone foundations look super yellow, and even neutral foundations on me look very yellow. So once that's done, we just take a little bit more wherever we feel we need a little more coverage. And then we would go in with concealer. Now, there are also stick and powder foundations. With the stick, and I'm gonna layer this today just so you can see, you definitely get a little bit more coverage with most sticks. However, I don't love applying them with a sponge because I find that it doesn't really drag it quite as well as I would like. With these, I do prefer to go in with a brush because I find that I can kind of stipple the product and move it around a little bit better and a little bit easier. But once I am done blending, that was my eye. Once I am done blending all of that out, I do then like to go into the sponge just so that I can get that flawless finish. So I'm gonna go throw on my concealer and then we'll come back to talk about powder foundation. Okay, so concealer is done and the face is set down with a light amount of powder. This is where we go into powder foundation. So for powder foundation, I do like to go in with a little bit of a fluffier but still flat top brush. I don't like taking creams down my neck because I find that they crease. So this is the Studio Fix powder from MAC. What I like to do is you see how down here there's a little discoloration. I didn't quite go in as heavy with the foundation, but you can still kind of see where my facial hair would grow in. That's normally where I will take a powder foundation and I will use that to add a little bit more coverage on the places where I find I need more. And then those are also what I will take down the neck and over the ears so that my ears don't look super red. If you look in some of my really early videos, My ears used to be so red because I never used to put anything on them. I'm also going to link a video here of an entire face that I did using only powder products, so you can see how powder foundations will work on their own with nothing underneath. But honestly, like, the way that the products layer is what makes them so universal, I think. Because not everybody is going to use a cream foundation, a powder foundation, a stick foundation, all on the same face. Normally I don't either, but for the sake of today, I was going to. So if you want something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more seamless, the powder is probably the way to go. If you want to neutralize everything and have to recontour and rebronze and put all this stuff back into your face when you lose all your features, then you might want to go for more of a full coverage, which would be a stick or a liquid. So now that we've kind of seen how the powder foundation works on top of the skin, I'm going to go finish up the rest of the complexion and be back to talk to you guys about tool selections, shade matching, and pretty much everything else you need to know about foundation. Alright, so now the complexion is done, we can talk about some of the other factors that go into what you're going to use and why. So I am going to make Brandon hate me for a second, and I'm going to use the top of my mirror just to demonstrate what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take a little bit of foundation in 3 little drops on top of the mirror. They are all about the same size, the works. So first thing I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to blend this out with my finger. So you see how that is not fully opaque, it's a little patchy, none of the areas are completely smooth, and it is definitely not airbrushed. Then I'm going to take a foundation brush on this one down here, and I am going to swirl the foundation brush. Now you'll see it is definitely a lot smoother, but you do have some dry patches and some areas where it is streaking. So it's not exactly smooth or airbrushed. Then when you go in with a beauty blender, I'm going to take that right on this last dot. And we're just going to blend this in. And you'll see on this one, it is a more seamless application. It is not going in too much where you are overusing product. You are getting just enough to cover everything, but it is still smooth and flawless and... Yes, Brandon.
I know you're not demoing on that dirty ass mirror.
I am totally demoing on this mirror.
Let me see that mirror.
So that's where you would get a little bit more of that airbrushed finish. And that's why when I'm using a water-based foundation, I like to go in with a sponge, because I find that it uses less product, it spreads it out a little bit more smooth and seamless, but also I get that airbrushed finish without the lines, the streaking, and the smudginess that you get with your fingers and a brush. Now, I do like to use a foundation brush at times as well, and you guys have seen me use that a bunch of times, but you'll notice I do always take my sponge and just kind of pat over it, just to make sure I soak up any extra product and give myself that smooth airbrushed finish. Now the last thing we're going to talk about is shade matching, and I'm going to grab 2 foundations that are definitely not my color so I can show you why. So the 3 foundations I chose to use are the Dior Forever in the shade 22 Cameo, which I consider to be my perfect match. Then, right next to it, we have Milk Makeup in the shade Light, which you'll see is a little bit too red, so that would be too cool tone for me. Then over here, we have the Becca Skin Love in the shade Buff, which you'll see is a little bit too yellow, which makes it a little too warm for me. All 3 of these are about the same in tone, but it's the undertone that's making whether or not it matches to me or it doesn't. Now with a little bit of bronzer or a little bit of concealer, you can make pretty much any of these shades work. I have and will wear all 3 of these foundations. I do like the way that they wear. I do like the finishes they have. The Dior one is absolutely my perfect match. I have a perfect match in Fenty. There's a bunch of shades that do have my perfect match, but a lot of times you'll find that it is the right depth or lightness for you, but the undertone will be off. So like the Becca Skin Love is definitely a little too yellow for me. It is a lot warmer. But again, when you blend it in and you do wear it, it's not super noticeable, but I do find that I need to go in with a more cool toned concealer, and I will definitely need to take in a little bit less on the bronzer, or I'll go with a cooler bronzer, because a warm bronzer will make me look too orange and too yellow. Opposite side of the coin, if I go in with the Milk Makeup Blur Liquid, this is in the shade Light. If I take this all over the back of the hand, you'll notice that compared to my actual skin tone, it is a little bit more on the, it's a little bit more on the cool tone side, so it does have a little bit more red than I typically am. With that, I just go in with a little bit more of a neutral concealer, and I go in with a little more bronzer or a warmer bronzer to help warm up the face and make that cool feature dissipate. So again, there's ways that you can play around with the foundation, but when you are shade matching, you do want to make sure that you're going in with the shade that is actually your undertone as well as your tone. So you could be warm and deep, or you could be cool and fair, or you could be warm and fair, and anything in between. Technically, I am considered in the Sephora catalog, I am a 3R05 or an 06, depending on the foundation. Some of them are categorized as a 6, some are a 5, but they are both perfect matches. So that means that I am about a third of the way on depth, which would make me like a light medium. And as far as the 3R, that means I am not neutral, I am definitely leaning cool. So make sure to go into your local Sephora to get your color IQ, and you can figure out exactly what your shade is. But do understand that a lot of times that is a guideline, and you'll find that, like, according to the color IQ, these two are not the exact same shade. This is a 3R05 and this is a 3R06, but once this oxidizes down, these are actually the exact same color and they are both my perfect match. So that's just something to think about when you are dealing with color IQ and technology, because a lot of times you'll think that that is a be-all, end-all, this is your perfect shade, and honestly, everybody has like 2 or 3 perfect shades. The last thing I'm going to talk about when shade matching is that everybody naturally is multiple colors. My neck and my face do not match. You'll notice, and a lot of times people have commented, that it always looks like my foundation is too light until I go in with my bronzer, and then I match. And the reason for that is my face is naturally like 2 shades darker than my neck. Most of us, our faces are either too light or too dark compared to our neck, and I would rather have this match this than have this match what it is and have my neck have that line of foundation where one stops and one starts. Because nothing is cute about that line of demarcation where the foundation ends and your skin begins. This right now, from where I took that powder foundation just to blend everything together, there's really no line where one starts and one begins. Like, you do see a little bit on where I contoured and a little bit of bronzer, but that's just shadow, that's not color. So a very important thing that I did forget to talk about earlier, but I'll go over now, is the finish of your foundation. So the main finishes associated with foundation are satin, matte, there's like demi-matte and stuff like that, and luminous. So from the range, you have your luminous, which is your super shiny, glowy foundations. You have your satin, which is kind of in the middle, and then you have your mattes, which are dry, and they, on dry skin, look powdery, but on people like me who are very oily, they just look natural. You want to find your foundation based on your skin type. So if you have very oily skin and you go into a luminous foundation, you're going to look luminous at first, and then you're just going to look sweaty and greasy by the end of the day. That being said, if you have very dry skin and you go in with a super matte foundation, it's going to look okay when you first apply it, but throughout the day it's going to settle into your lines, it's going to crack, and it's going to look super dry, like desert dry. So you really want to make sure that you're pairing your products. If you, like me, I like the Dior foundation, which I think I've said like 1,000 times. That is more of a demi-matte or a natural finish. So when I'm using that, because it's not super matte, I make sure to go in with a mattifying primer as well as a mattifying powder and a mattifying setting spray. Whereas if I'm going in with something like Fenty, which is already super matte, I can go in with a little bit lighter of a primer, powder, and setting spray because the foundation is already fairly matte. Now, I typically don't go for any luminous foundations because I find I get too greasy to even try to use them. I have worn them a few times for like pictures or videos, but honestly, I don't love the way they look. I don't love the way they wear, and they're just not for me. So based on your skin type, make sure you are picking a foundation that works for you. A lot of times I'll rave about a foundation and people will comment down below that they hated it, and a lot of times it's just for our skin types. I am very oily. I am not at all ashamed of that. I don't hide that. So for me, when I'm picking a foundation, I want to stay looking dry and flawless as long as humanly possible with as minimal touch-ups as I can. There are foundations on me that look very dry, but after a half hour of wearing them, I look beautiful and I love it. Whereas on somebody with dry skin, it's going to look dry and it's just going to get drier. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know what you found most helpful about it. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!